we're lucky enough there to be making auto parts from aluminum for cars. Jobs are coming back up. But if we put a tariff on the ingots that come in from overseas, that'll raise the prices, that will hurt. Our aluminum comes from Canada, none from China. So I hope you'll look carefully at where the aluminum comes from.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
And you're right. Now, I have to say this. Canada has treated us very, very unfairly when it comes to lumber and timber. Very unfairly. So we have to understand that. You know, it's not just one thing or another. Canada has been very tough on this country when it comes to timber, lumber, and other things. And they have not been easy when it comes to Wisconsin and our farmers. Because you try and ship product into Canada if you're a farmer. If you are a farmer up in Wisconsin and other places, you try and ship your things up to Canada, it's been a very tough situation for them. I will say that. But I agree with what you're saying. It's very much a double-edged sword. Ron?
Well, you mentioned Wisconsin, so
Good.
you understand. I was obviously in manufacturing for 30-some years, and I've exported a lot of products. So the fact that matter is, Mr. President, Wisconsin operates a trade surplus with both Canada and Mexico, because we not only export manufacturing products but also agricultural products, and trade works very well for Wisconsin. I agree with the concerns that you've expressed, as well as concerns of Senator Toomey and Senator Lee. What we have is the basic root cause of this problem is a massive overcapacity, primarily in China. That's true. How do you address that? And I think we need to be very cautious without raising prices. Senator Alexander was talking about 2002. Spot prices increased somewhere between 69 and 82%. Producer prices went up from 19 to 27%. Now, let me add just another dimension to this nobody's really talked about. We talk about jobs, absolutely. We want the highest paying jobs. I think our tax reform is going to juice the economy, and with such a tight labor market, I think wages are already increasing. In Wisconsin, a big manufacturing state, in 7 years, I have not visited one manufacturer that can hire enough people. That was certainly my experience in the last 20, 25 years. For a host of reasons, we tell our kids have to get a 4-year degree. We pay people not to work. So we do need to be concerned about, in such a tight labor market, do we have enough workers in manufacturing? So my final point is, it makes no sense to me to try and bring back high labor content manufacturing to America. We need to do the value-added things. And so I just say proceed with real caution. There are trade abuses, address those, attack those, try and figure out how to address this massive oversupply in the steel industry, but do it very carefully, because we have experience.
You're right, Ron. I agree.
Okay?
I agree with you 100%. I do have to say that we do have a pool of 100 million people, of which many of them want to work. They want to have a job. A lot of them do better not working, frankly, under the laws. And people don't like to talk about it, but you're competing against government. And they have great potential. They sort of want to work, but they're making less if they work than if they stay home and do other things. So we have to address that situation. That's a big problem. But we have a pool of 100 million people, a lot of whom want to work. We will also have a very much more merit-based immigration policy, where we're going to bring in people that are going to be great workers and going to really fill up Foxconn and all of the places. Like, I was very instrumental in getting you Foxconn, as you know, and through my friendships with that great company. And they're going to Wisconsin. It's going to be incredible. They're going to employ tremendous numbers of people. They're going to build one of the biggest plants in the world, so it's going to be very exciting. But people will move there, but we do have a big pool of people that want to work, and they can. Just to address the one other point, we have a trade deficit with Canada. We have a big imbalance of at least $17 billion. And with Mexico, we have an imbalance. We have a trade deficit of $71 billion, and I believe that number is really much higher than that. I might ask Bob Lighthizer to just discuss that, but were you going to say one other thing?
As long as you brought up the whole immigration debate, there is absolutely no doubt that we have to fix our horribly broken legal immigration system. One of my proposals is literally a 3-year guest worker visa program managed by the states. Let the states determine, what industries they can set the wage rates, and they can completely control that process. So I'm hoping, as part of this bipartisan process, that we actually fix our horribly broken legal immigration system, so we do have the workers, and it has to be merit-based. So I've asked my Democratic colleagues, please work with us. Let's fix the dreamer problem. let's also fix our horribly broken legal immigration
Good.
system.
Thank you, Ron. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to make a point about, back to 232. I'll focus on steel, 232 in Pennsylvania. In your opening, you talked about the job impact as well as the national security impact. I'm glad you raised both. I'll just focus on national security. In western Pennsylvania, as well as in eastern Pennsylvania, you have two examples among several, but the two are AK Steel in western Pennsylvania. They are the last remaining manufacturer of electrical steel, meaning the steel that goes into our electricity grid. They've been hammered by this, as you know. In the eastern part of the state, as Senator Young from Indiana mentioned, ArcelorMittal.
Bob, they've been hammered by what?
Hammered by not having the remedy of a 232 remedy.
Okay.
So, to the extent that you can focus on that, I think the steel executives, the letter they sent you on the 1st of February, I think outlines the problem. But this really is a national security issue.
Why didn't the previous administration help the steel workers? Why didn't the previous administration work on 232?
Well, I would look. I think there are a lot of us that had disagreements over the years with the administration then about being more aggressive on these
Tremendous
issues.
disservice.
I just hope that in this, I know it's a 90-day period you're
Right.
within, but I hope you can promptly determine it.
Good. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it. Rob?
Mr. President, I agree with Bob that that's a good example. AK Steel was the last electrical steel manufacturer, 101% increase over the last year in electrical steel coming into our country. It's a small market, but it's a critical market. They tell us that if they don't get relief, they're going to pull out of this business, so we won't have the steel that goes into our transformers and our grid. And so I think it is a good example, but what I would say, sir, and we've talked about this before, any response here needs to be targeted, and electrical steel is a place to target it. The other place, I think, is the oil country product that was talked about earlier. This is pipe and tube, 82% increase there. And, you know, frankly, most of it's coming from Korea, and Korea doesn't have a single rig. In other words, they're taking Chinese steel for the most part, and it's in effect transshipping it to us.
They're doing a lot of transshipping.
And that's hurting our ability to continue to have this energy independence we talked about. So those are two specific areas where I do think that there's an opportunity to do something, and to use 232, which is a national security, as opposed to 201, which is what President Bush used.
Good.
But let me tell you, with regard to rolled steel and with regard to other products, as Senator Brown said, we've had some pretty good success by going after them with regard to unfair trade practices. And that's the Level the Playing Field Act, which is just now being implemented. And as I've told you before, I think even stronger enforcement of that would be great, because that will
Well,
enable
they had
us
very little
to.
enforcement before. We're very strongly enforcing it now. And Wilbur, you might want to talk about that, but
And
we
the
are
second-
very strongly.
the
But
second part
they
of
have
this-
had not good enforcement previous to
Yeah.
this.
The second part of this, and you're right, is with regard to the Enforce Act.
Right.
And that's, and again, Ron Wyden and Senator Brown and I and others have worked on this, but what it says is that if a country transships, in other words, sends their steel, say, to Malaysia, which we believe happens with regard to Chinese steel, puts a different stamp on it, made in Malaysia, then sends it here, we need to be more aggressive in going after them. And it's just a matter of Customs and Border Protection having so many other responsibilities right now, but we can do more with our existing laws as well. And I think 232 is part of the overall response, but it needs to be targeted. I agree with what Senator Alexander and others have said about the balance, Senator Toomey and others. You got to be careful, because we don't want to increase the cost to our consumers of all these steel products that go into our other manufacturing. But there are areas, like electrical, like pipe and tube, where we've got to stand up and help to defend, in the case of electrical, our last American manufacturer.
Right. Well, you know, Rob, we have steel coming into our country from countries that don't even know what steel is. They don't make it. They never made it. It's transshipping. It's coming from China and some others, but mostly from China. And they send it through countries that don't make steel. And it comes pouring into our country. And free. And it's a very bad situation. Kevin?
Yes, so one, I think everyone in this room supports you aggressively holding China accountable for its overcapacity in a major way. Thank you for that. 232 is a little like old-fashioned chemotherapy. It isn't used as much because it can often do as much damage as good. And an example, it happens all around the country, but we send steel pellets from Corpus Christi over to Austria to this company that does this amazing job, super refined, specific job. We bring it back to Navasota, Texas, in my district, refine it even further, sell it to many American energy companies who use that specialized steel to compete and win against Russia and China and all the other countries. If transactions like that are pretty typical around the country get caught up, in that case we've punished 3 American manufacturing industries for that, all of whom, by the way, are looking at expanding because of your tax reform plan.
Right.
And so my point is, so we have to be really targeted. You have to be really targeted here. Also, we've got allies with us against China's unfair trade practices. We have to be careful as you look at these decisions to target it to make sure our allies are with us as we do this.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ken. Rick?
Senator Peter? Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. President. One thing I want to point out, we've had the conversation about the national security imperative, and I think we've looked at it in the context of the defense industry. And I just want to add one thing to that. It's our ability to address our own inputs, not just addressing the needs of the defense industry, but our ability to produce for our own consumption as we take on infrastructure
Right.
projects and so on.
That's right.
So I think we don't just need to focus on those percentages, but also broadly how this impacts our ability to provide for our own inputs. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is 74% capacity right now here in the United States. The steel industry is losing market share, and that translates
Rapidly.
to economic loss in communities. As Representative Bost, he and I co-chair the Steel Caucus, and so we're very keenly aware of what this can do to these communities when we don't have that kind of certainty.
Good. Thank you, Rick. Thank you very much. Senator?
Mr. President, I appreciated your comments about Michigan and the auto industry. I'd like to say that a big reason why those jobs are coming back is because we have the best workers anywhere in the world here.
Well,
in the
that's
United
also
States,
true.
and certainly here. And they can build it on time and build it with outstanding quality as long as the rules are fair. So I appreciate this issue. It should be
You do have
bipartisan.
great workers. The problem is you didn't have good policy, and that's why so many jobs left, but now they're coming back, and they like coming back to Michigan.
Well, they love coming back to Michigan as long as we have fair rules, and so
Right.
we have to continue to push this forward. I'd like to pick up on Senator Alexander's comments too, is that we also have to be concerned about the auto parts industry as well.
Right.
We have probably more jobs in auto parts in Michigan than any other of the industrial sectors, so they all go together. We've got to deal with the steel pricing issue. I agree with everything that's been said here, but then we can't have the dumping of auto parts that will take away Michigan jobs as well as jobs
You're
around
right.
the country. And if I can just bring up one other issue that I think we should take a look at. I'm working in a bipartisan way with Senator Burr on an issue related to the Commerce Department having the ability to self-initiate trade enforcement actions smaller than industries like steel or aluminum or washing machines, is that we have small businesses that don't have the resources, quite frankly, to bring a trade enforcement case,
Good
to
point.
go through the lawyers to do that. Michigan, for example, we have cherries. Right now we've got the dumping of cherries. That's making it very difficult for our growers in Michigan, but they don't have the resources to bring those kinds of enforcement actions. So we're working on legislation to give Secretary Ross, the Department of Commerce, more tools to help our
I like
small
that.
businesses, and I'd love to have your help.
You have my help. I think it's a fantastic idea. Because you're right, they can't hire the lawyers, it's too small, but it's, in a double way, it's very, very big. Wilbur, you working on that?
Yes, sir.
Good.
As you know, for the first time in many years, Commerce Department did self-initiate. Happened it was in a big industry, it was in aluminum. But there are limitations to what a conventional trade case can do. And the main limitation is it doesn't prevent people from the transshipment through other countries. A lot of what 232 can do for us is to solve that problem. And 232 doesn't have to mean the same tariff on every single country, doesn't have to mean the same tariff on every single product. It can be applied in a much more surgical way, and we've presented the President with a range of alternatives that goes from a big tariff on everything from everywhere to very selective tariffs on a very selected group of countries. There are one or two countries that figure quite prominently in all of the list, and those names will come as no surprise to you. But for example,
And the problem you have with that, though, is transshipping. You
Yes.
think you're going to put a pinpoint on a country, but then they ship it to other countries that you're not even thinking
Right,
about,
and
so you have to be careful
yeah,
with that.
so what the 232 would let us do is to have quotas on the countries that we weren't putting a tariff. Put a quota, say, at what they're shipping in now. So it's not going to restrict supply, but it would prevent the evildoers